And today we're meeting Rebecca and Sallyann, who wrote Uncertain Fruit, which is a memoir of infertility, loss, and love. And it is a powerful book. It's powerful for so many reasons. One, because it follows the course of their relationship. It follows the course, or it introduces us to the lives that they led before they were together, and then what happens as they come together in the search for building a family together versus the families that they had before they came together, and how those families come together as well. So it's a lot of things crisscrossing, but the emotional experience that you go through with them makes it a very unique and powerful book. And anybody who has wanted to be a parent, anyone who has felt a really strong desire to have family and to know what family is, there are so many points in this book that just slap you across the face and say, haha, you're not alone in this world. Many other people have experienced all these same things.
Yeah.
I know that we, my spouse and I, we adopted 2 boys at birth, and they came, the adoption agency was in Texas. And when I went to pick up my first child when he was born, the first thing they tell you is the court in Texas has a year. And anytime in that year, they can come and take the child. So you're on tenterhooks the whole time, not knowing. And the social worker comes to visit to make sure that you're living up to the expectations of the court. And then at the end of the year from New York, I had to fly back to Texas to go in front of the judge. And they want pictures and they want this and they want that. And so you're nervous the whole time. And then at the end, the judge said to me, hope you'll do this again and get another child, which made me feel very relieved. But that is something that you don't realize that other people experience the same way. You know that they may experience it, you know they may have other kinds of issues, but when you read this, you say, maybe not exactly the same, but there are so many things that you share. And so now we're gonna ask you guys to tell us your story, how, I know it says it in the book, how you met, but give us all the stuff that leads to the bulk of the book so that people understand where you came from and how it resulted in this tremendous emotional experience.
Wonderful. Well, first of all, thank you so much, everybody who is here. My name is Sallyann, and this is Rebecca Majoya. We always say joy in the middle. And why don't you start by talking about...
I'm so grateful for your introduction.
Yeah,
so fantastic, because one of the reasons we started writing this as really a way of processing our grief after 8 years,
8 years of infertility treatments.
And then the timing, I can't. Then trying to adopt through foster care, through adoption agencies, and then having a baby for 10 days and having them reclaimed, as they call it. And so it was just like processing our grief. But also, as we were doing that, we realized we connected with so many people who had similar stories. Like at the end of the day, they didn't have a baby. And you read all these adoption, but can I swear here? All these adoption that have a happy ending. They all, like, it doesn't matter if it's infertility, if it's adoption, whatever, they all have a happy ending. And here you sit and you have a baby, and it's like, what the hell? Does this ever happen to anybody else? And we found that it did. And there just wasn't a book out there that reflected the struggle that we had. And when you said, you know, you felt like you weren't alone in reading it, that's what we wanted. We wanted it published so that people could read something and know that they weren't alone in the process. So thank you
Mhm.
for having us and for the introduction.
Mhm.
So
I know Rebecca touched briefly upon the fact that we went through this journey of both the, infertility treatments and adoption and trying to build our family. But when we came together, Rebecca had 2 boys from a previous marriage. And so we were really adding to our family. And
in a different way,
In a different
because
way.
you want a
Mhm.
baby together.
mhm,
We had these 2 boys that were amazing and
Mhm.
are still. And it was interesting that during the adoption process, you have to get written statements from friends, relatives, whatever. They ask about all of your family, and our grown kids wrote to the adoption agencies about why we should add to our family. And that was really heart-wrenching, to hear your kids talk about how we are great parents. Who else? I mean, there's nobody else on the planet that it's better to hear from, that we think you deserve another kid. Yeah. We didn't mess you up too much. But it's different, it's different because I had them in a different relationship that was not one that I was ever comfortable in, just doing it because it's what I thought I was supposed to do. I was raised very right-wing, fundamental, born-again Christian in rural Michigan, and didn't come out until just a few years before I met Sallyann. So it wasn't until after I had the kids and had divorced that, and a lot of therapy, that I was able to say, this is who I am, and it's okay who I am. I'm not going to hell in a handbasket or any other way. I'm not, I don't have to hate myself. So it was from a different place. It was from this whole different place in our relationship of love and wanting to expand our family and have a child together. And Sallyann had never had an infant.
Right. When we met, the boys were 6 and 8 years old. And then we kind of took our time introducing them into our relationship. I had been in a relationship with somebody who had children, and then and Rebecca was also wanting to take things slowly. So we actually started out in couples counseling very early on, and just trying to figure out how we wanted to introduce the boys to us to begin with.
Right. Just do it in the most positive way possible.
Well, I think one thing that's important is, what do you two do, or what did you do at that time professionally?
Yes.
Because I think that that's important in understanding how complex this kind of scenario is, even when you come to it with certain experiences.
Yeah. So I was working at a shelter for domestic and sexual violence shelter, and we did legal work. We did all those kind of things. So it's funny, on our first date, I asked Sallyann if she wanted me to pick her up or drive herself, and she said, I want to drive her myself. And I'm like, good idea. You don't even know me.
Yes. You're always so much more respectful of the fact that I was like, I'll meet you there.
Yeah. And I remember telling her that I had kids and they have issues, and I have issues, and I have an ex who has issues. To be very open about who I am and what I bring to the table. Because it was love at first sight. I mean, I was smitten when I met Sallyann.
Maybe we should read a
do
couple
some reading?
pieces.
You want us to
And
do some
then...
Absolutely.
Okay.
Cool.
All right.
All right.
Such a good lead in to.
I have trifocals. I need the big book. And
Is that the original manuscript?
No. Yeah.
this is the final
Yes.
manuscript. Yeah, I just printed it out so I could actually read it.
Okay. So the pieces that we chose to read to you, by the way, are the thread of this story is around the adoption and the failed adoption. But most of the pieces that we are choosing to read are sort of more the contextual pieces around the fertility and our relationship.
Now, are you reading the pieces that you respectively wrote, Or are you reading each other's pieces?
We also are reading our own pieces as
Okay.
well. Thank you.
Yeah, because in the book, we go back and forth between our
Yes.
voices through the whole book.
Dr. Fitzpatrick was staring at me quizzically, as if wondering where I'd gone or why I hadn't immediately responded to him. "Are you doing okay?" he asked as he began inserting the speculum. "You seem pretty tense. Just breathe. That will make it easier." I'm pretty sure I'd heard that a million times in my life, but didn't he know how difficult it was to breathe when searing pain was shooting up your body? I could sense his tension. I was not opening up easily. I stared at the ceiling. There was nothing there but blue paint. I could have used one of those rooms with a Caribbean Sea poster or a fuzzy kitty looking down at me. Instead, I had blue paint under glaring fluorescent lights, and now he was doing his best to assuage my tension by asking me if it usually hurt like this, if I had trouble with sex because of it. Really? Maybe he thought he was using his doctor skills to get me to talk and deliver some release of my pelvic muscles, as if I could breathe between words. Then voila, before we knew it, he'd done the deed and pulled out. He didn't have a clue what sex was for Becky and me, and he wasn't comfortable asking. When he had prepped for the removal of Rebecca's uterus, he did have the kindness and forethought to inquire whether she would want to keep her ovaries intact. And then he added, "I'm not exactly sure if this is important to you and your partner, since I'm not sure what you do for sex, but I can also keep your cervix intact if you would like, if this matters to you sexually in particular." He was doing his best to be politically correct. And we chuckled after he exited. What exactly do you lesbians do?
Mystery. I wanted to have a baby with her. Was that so wrong? Because I am a woman, I could do nothing to help her. I read about it in the paper every day. There were so many people who didn't deserve a baby that had one. People who neglected them or abused them. They were people who just popped them out like rabbits. I just wanted to have a baby with Sallyann, and I couldn't. I couldn't give her anything from me that would create a baby in her. I could not, no matter how often or lovingly I made love to Sallyann, impregnate her. I could not. I gave birth to 2 boys with my ex-husband, but now I was completely and desolately infertile. The emergency hysterectomy I'd had would not allow me to even offer a womb to carry a child for us. We sat up long nights in bed looking through hundreds of sperm donor profiles. On that large, soft, king-size bed, we lay surrounded by 6 or more pillows piled up to comfortably lean against. 3 cats, 1 on each side of the bed and 1 at our feet. The first choice was which donor bank to work with. Each had its own questions and features. Some would give only a minuscule amount of information if you didn't pay extra money per profile. There were long pages of questions with answers from prospective donors on health, education, hobbies. How would we know if they were telling the truth? From the backgrounds given, most were college age and most likely doing it for the money, regardless of the flowery things that they wrote.
I was okay now with the fact that my baby daddy was not holding roses for me or a drink. He wasn't spouting off his latest idea or ruminating over the world with his coffee and newspaper. That is, while he could have been doing all these things and more somewhere on this earth, he was not doing them with or for me. There was a time I thought differently. I had believed in the ideal conception, all hearts and flowers, all emboldened by love. I had believed in the love of a man and a woman uniting to create the majesty and miracle of an earthling. I had believed that was the only option, and I wanted so badly to experience that. But it was much more of a playful idea, like pretending as a little girl to marry my Muppet Scooter doll. It was a grand wedding for Scooter. I called him John, and me. I donned my best dress and my veil and carried him down the green indoor-outdoor carpeting of my bedroom, so proud of our devotion to each other. I even requested a photographer to commemorate this holy day. I was in love with Scooter John, and he was enthralled with me, and together we would live just like the fairy tales, happily ever after. We hadn't talked children then, Scoot and I, but it was a given. After all, everyone knew the playground chant, and I had already checked off love and marriage. Obviously, next would come the baby carriage.
I remember seeing Sallyann for the first time. I met her in a little holistic health store. It was called Peace of Mind, for real. You can't make that up. I knew Peace of Mind carried gifts and cards because, well, I'd been there a few times before, but it'd been a while. I never believed in love at first sight until that moment. I saw her and I knew it was a real thing, but you can see someone and feel you have known them your entire life, maybe more than a lifetime. As I walked in, there she was, standing behind the long counter in front of a collection of boxes and ribbons for gift wrapping. I need a gift, I stammered. A gift for someone getting married that you think is making a very bad decision? I joked without indicating that the gift was for my ex-girlfriend who had cheated on me with an unauthorized immigrant. She was marrying him to help him get a US green card so he could stay in the country. Since she was pregnant with his child, her fourth, all within 6 weeks of cheating on me. I need something simple, I continued, more to allay the nervousness that had come over me than to convey the actual gift choice. Do you have anything that's inexpensive but thoughtful? I added. It sounded cheesy the moment it came out of my mouth. For the next half hour, we walked around the store. I talked, she laughed, I laughed. At one point, she blushed. I think I may have blushed too. We managed to find a little angel pin that fit the bill. She wrapped it, choosing the paper and ribbons so perfectly, I thought. So appropriately and sweetly, making it look more majestic than the contents deserved. I wanted to hug her when I left. I wanted to stay, but I was on my way to my second job at a restaurant up the hill. I explained my black and white apparel so she would understand this wasn't my desired attire. It was just what was demanded by my next hours of service. But why did I need her to care about my clothing choices? It was later that night that I knew I would be making many more trips to Peace of Mind. 21 years later.
Where was the shop?
It was near Killington, Vermont.
Okay.
Yeah.
I stayed up there.
Did you? That's awesome. How cool. It's no longer there, unfortunately, but it was a great place at the time. And for so many reasons.
You took it on the mountain?
They took it on the mountain, yes.
Yes, it's gone, all gone.
Healthy tours, really.
Right? Oh. My children are burdens, Rebecca once declared to her younger coworker, Stephanie. Stephanie was horrified and she gasped. But it's true, Rebecca said. Everyone is a burden. We're all burdens to each other. This raised more indignation from Stephanie. It doesn't mean they are not worth it, Stephanie, she continued. They are the greatest sources of my sorrow, but also of my joy. They're worth it every day. Stephanie remained fixated on the negative connotation of that one word, but I understood the practical wisdom Rebecca conveyed. Each additional life on this planet is a life we all carry, even when we're not personally touched by it. We carry each other, and it can be an awesome load to bear. It can make us resentful, even furious, because we are individuals with egos. And we feel that with each additional person on the planet, our ego survival is threatened. Often, we have no choice as to whether another child is in our midst. We live with others' choices every day, just as much as we live with our own.
Give me the baby. We would whisper to each other when we saw infants in a store or on the street. Give me the baby. Then we giggle a nervous laugh that came to diffuse the fear that there would never be a tiny little one in our arms, even though one had grown in our hearts for years, years that kept adding up, full of failed attempts at having the pile of diapers and tiny clothes in our room, filled with the new smell of a little life, that glorious fragrance of a newborn baby. Everywhere we went, we seemed to run into young mothers pushing strollers with 2 or 3 babies in them, cell phones in a hand, lit cigarettes dangling, thoughts obviously elsewhere. They meandered along, apparently oblivious to how favored they were to be able to produce these little precious ones. No wonder we felt like saying, give me the baby. Give us the baby to hold and to read to and care for. We didn't make a lot of money, but we had a lot of love to give. So why should the only ones get with lots of money or lots of fertility be the ones to get the babies?
We are at the will of others. Another to decide that we are the arms that should hold the baby. Another mother will have to choose us, to connect to us through photos, to read the booklet we have painstakingly put together. Somehow she will decide from that without seeing into our hearts. Much as we had hoped with the sperm donors, another mother will hope we are telling the truth of our lives, that the pictures are truly reflective of a joyful place where someone else will raise her infant to an adult. Again, we are completely at another woman's mercy. Please, please be merciful this time. That's
Wow. Questions?
Questions.
I'd like to, first of all, your writing is beautiful.
Thank you.
And I love the way that you seem to weave together the 2 different voices and blend them into one. So I guess one of the questions I have a lot of questions, but one of them I have is your process. How did you write this separately and yet together? That's really a challenging thing to do.
Yes, it is. It's a great question. I think initially, well, first of all, after we lost the baby, we do what you would normally do. We ran away from home. And we were fortunate enough at that time that we could work remotely before it was cool. So we were in a little 24-foot RV together. And it was really our way, I think, of processing our grief, that we both would just wake up at random times in the night, or, you know, maybe jotting things down during the day. And there were times that we would, you know, wake up in the morning and we would say, oh, I got up at 2 a.m. last night and the muse hit and I wrote this piece, and so it's not really great, but I need to read it to you. And then the other one would listen. And of course it would just set off, you know, something for the other partner. And it was actually, I think it was one of the ways that we healed.
It stayed on the same
And
page.
stayed on, yes.
Because you know, grief is like this, it's not that linear thing. And so one day I might just be so pissed at the system, at the world, at whatever. At the same time that she's, you know, was in a place where she was fantasizing and completely denial and fantasizing that the birth mother was going to call us back and say, okay, I changed my mind again. We're going to give you back the baby. So we both went, it like kept us in tune to what the other person was feeling and where they were at on a regular basis, sharing what we had read or written.
Yeah. Because grief is such an individual process, and what we learned as we were writing different pieces, and we have thousands of pages that aren't even in the book. We learned just how individual our own experiences were, but also that one grief touches upon another. And so these threads of different parts of our lives were coming up that we hadn't even ever really processed, that had caused a lot of pain for us.
Or thought I'd process.
Yes.
Boom,
Right.
there it is again.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So it sounds like sometimes the experience of each of you writing to put some of that down caused maybe even longer conversations.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think it was definitely a way that helped keep us together, because so many couples at this point in time would have just gone
Mhm.
their separate ways for various reasons.
At this point, more of our time together, we've been trying to have a baby than not.
Mhm.
And so I was terrified that Sallyann might just wake up one morning and say, I just can't look at you anymore. Because all I can think of is not having a baby and the infertility process and whatever. So I was so afraid that maybe the grief would just
Mhm.
push us right apart. And so, yeah. And I was diagnosed with compassion fatigue right after we lost the baby.
Mm.
I'd been a social worker at that point for about
25 years.
20 so,
Yes.
yeah, and I just, I wasn't at the women's shelter anymore. I was at a mentoring agency, which was not as heavy duty, not as crisis oriented and stuff, but still, it was just like, I went from, one day just so passionate about my work. And so to the next day, like, I just don't give a damn if any of you get mentors. I just don't care. And it's weird to process that, it's like what happened to me? And to have, thank goodness, you're still in therapy, and I had somebody explain it to me, and yeah, you need a break from social work. You really do. And so,
And I think an important piece of that too was that the birth mother and the baby that we were adopting were part of the community that you had served for those many years too. So that made it that much more difficult to think about going back into that.
and in my little brain, it was like the community saying, fuck you to me. And it has nothing to do, it's not us. It's not personal, but it felt, like I have served this community for 5 years. and- Yeah.
About the birth mother, so she
Yeah.
just decided to keep the baby.
Well, it's more.
It's complicated, but
Way more
and
complicated.
if you read the story.
But it's definitely more.
No, we only met her 10 days before she was about something like that before she
No,
gave.
it
2
was
weeks
pretty early. Yeah, about 2 weeks before
before she
gave
gave birth.
birth.
So it was very late in the game.
Yes.
Someone who knew us and was working with her knew that she was saying things like, I'm just gonna leave the baby at the
At the
hospital. Like, I
hospital.
can't do this. And so
Mhm.
connected us. And so even though we were connected with an agency and licensed foster care and everything, this sort of private adoption just kind of dropped in our lap, we thought. And but there's so many factors for this teenager, not even finished high school, and it's fall and it's Vermont and it's cold, and her housing was in question if she didn't bring home a baby. And
Yeah, her mother was supportive of her choices, but not really.
No.
Yes.
no,
Yeah.
and so
There's definitely the
complicated.
grandmother playing a role in the
Mhm.
decision process there too.
And that made staying there in a small town in Vermont even more difficult, because it
Yes.
wasn't just her and the baby, it was that entire family.
Wow.
That was there.
Mhm.
And after she reclaimed the baby, we bumped into them, like twice in the next 10 days or something. We just bumped into them on the street, and it's like, hello.
Mhm.
And so we came down to Florida for a month or so,
Mhm.
just took a break just to come down and like, what are we gonna do next? How do we live through this? Where do we go? What do we do? And that's when we landed
Yeah.
in the RV.
Yeah. Yeah, we just happened to have an aunt and uncle who were selling an RV, actually. It was pretty close to
Where'd
where we knew. We ended up in Central Florida.
Mhm.
Yeah, so we were living close to them. Mhm.
In this little resort.
Yeah.
So when you were in the RV doing all the writing,
did you already have an intention of it being a book, or you were just working through your grief?
So
And
many
the
good
book idea
questions.
came later?
Yes.
Initially, it was just, we both love to read, to process and to write. It's just how we go about our life in the world. And so it was just a very natural way to process our grief. And like we said, we literally, we wake up at 2 a.m. and like couldn't get something out of our head, you know, that like you're wide awake. And so writing it down is a way to like puke it out on paper and then go back to sleep, you know? And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
We had an intention of maybe putting something out there that was more like how to survive the loss of, you know, and how to get through this.
Like an article or something, I think is more what we had in mind initially, or something. I don't know.
No, we talked about a book.
Did we?
Yeah,
Okay.
we did, but I don't think,
It's in the book that you talked.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So.
Her memory.
Exactly.
I always defer to her memory.
But I think that, you know, what was initially the plan for the book definitely evolved over time.
I had
Yeah.
a friend who was surrogate lost the baby, and so she wrote an article for a magazine talking about that. But in the meantime, what had happened, my friend had cancer, and that's why she didn't think she could have a baby, but she got pregnant. And the baby,
Wow.
everything's fine, and they used a surrogate for the second one. But the first one, the surrogate did lost the baby.
And we actually talked about surrogacy, but that's not even in the book. It's just so many ways that we,
Yeah, well, there are so many ways to explore expanding the family
Yeah,
too, so.
we
mhm,
almost, well, we, for a weekend, thought we were gonna get a baby through foster care, kinship care kind of thing.
mhm.
And that,
Which is also in the book.
yeah.
I have to remind you
Thank you,
sometimes.
I
because
know.
We wrote so many different things.
And
so.
she's the master. Sallyann is the master for making it flow. Because, you know, thousands of pages, and to try to put them, pick out what should be in the book versus what really connects with the thread and what order they should go and whatever. I was just like overwhelmed.
Mm,
It sounds like it took a while for you to decide that there was a framework for how to present the stories and thoughts and musings that you put together, huh?
I think so. I think, and I think that we had more of a initially maybe more chronological trajectory, and we had some readers take a look at different things, and then that's really when it was like, okay, this is the framework that, and you know, sometimes it just sort of directs you itself as well, but.
And one of our early readers said, I want to know more about your story.
Mhm.
So that I think is where more of that came in,
Mhm.
was,
Yeah, providing context.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So were these friends that were readers, or were you?
Primarily, yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
So you were the editor as well as a co-writer.
Yes.
like it.
yeah.
Yes.
Then we did have,
And we did
A line
reach out
editor.
to our line editor, yes.
yeah,
Yeah. Mhm. But that was towards the very end, right
at the
before
very end, yeah.
publication.
Yeah, you could either Rootstock could do it themselves, or we could hire
Mhm.
someone, and we
Mhm.
knew someone and trusted her with our story. We knew her, but she was also an editor. Because it is.
Very. Putting the baby out there, right?
Kind and thorough. Yeah, it's a whole nother baby. It's like we created this instead.
One of the other interesting parts of the book is when you were getting ready to move. And all of the trials and tribulations that not only you both went through, but your sons also had to
Yeah.
endure.
Yes.
You want to just a
Yeah.
little bit about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, our oldest met the baby. Our younger son never
And
got
you
a
were how old
chance.
at that point?
He was finishing up college.
So
Got
like
it.
Yeah.
20,
About
maybe?
21.
21.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry, girl. 21.
Mhm.
Yeah. And he loves children. He's almost 30 now, hoping to have children of his own, doesn't yet, but he actually held the baby one evening for a few hours and asked if he could read to the baby, because we were all avid readers in our family. We're like, of course you can. Can I read Redwall? We're like, yeah, one of his favorite books. It's like, okay. So he's holding the baby and reading the story, and And he met him a couple of times. He came over a couple of times and
Mhm.
engaged with him, and it was just so fun to think of, them having a new little brother, and they were so excited about it. So,
So you actually have a baby for a period of time.
Yes, we got to bring him home. and
yeah, we actually saw the baby.
Introduce him to the
born.
family, friends.
Yeah.
Yes.
Celebrate.
Celebrate. He was aware, he just couldn't get there in time.
He was going to
in.
be coming back
Yes.
next weekend. He was coming
Yes.
down, lived a couple hours away.
Yeah, but he
Yeah.
was, there's like a little text thread, he's celebrating and he's like, I want to gush, I want to gush. Can I, tell my roommates? And yes.
So
But
cute.
I think Robert too was talking about the packing up process.
Oh, yeah, when we're
Yes.
packing up
Mhm.
to move. So we had this, we went from 1,400 square feet into this 24-foot trailer. And it was intense, because this is where, and we felt differently being with the kids right after we lost the baby.
Mhm,
It was very different. Like I felt comforted
mhm.
being with them,
Oh, I think
and it was
I
different.
just think I was like emotionally so separated at that point. I felt very like I just couldn't, my grief was so great. I think I couldn't really be comforted. So.
Yeah, beyond it. So,
yeah.
so that was odd. It was
Mhm.
because we'd been so connected in with the kids and having the kids, and yeah, I remember Simeon snuggling up between us when he was just 6 years old and just getting to know Sallyann and saying, two moms bliss. And the older one was invited her to stay one night. It was snowing, and he's like, Mom, you have a double bed. Why doesn't Sallyann just stay? So they really bonded with Sallyann
Mhm.
and felt very connected. But it was this awkward place that we felt as a family. We just felt very awkward. So packing up our son, who had just finished college, his room and his books and his everything, and because we were going to rent the space, our home is a duplex up and down, and so the upstairs had always been rented, but we were going to rent the downstairs because we couldn't afford to go live in the RV and not rent the downstairs. And so it's kind of like we were throwing them into having to pack up their world too.
Mhm.
And it was awkward.
And it was heartbreaking. I think it just added to that sense
of what is happening with our
disconnect.
family. Yeah. Where is our family right now?
Mhm.
Yeah.
They were going to homeless.
Yes. Yes. And the younger one was living in Burlington up north of us.
He had a shared
Shared
living
living
situation.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he has autism. And then our older one just finishing college and hadn't gotten the job yet, and so was in this limbo place, and so was going to live with his dad. But it just
I think
felt
we were all in limbo.
all of us.
It's like it just threw us all into that.
Yeah,
In different ways, but
and we'd been in that home. I had already put a down payment on that place when I met Sallyann, so it's where our whole history was together, was in that home. So that was very intense, packing it up to move away too. Like, so this is where we dreamed of also having this third child. We had the crib, we had all of it ready to welcome another child, as we're packing all of that up. And we had friends who actually assembled the crib for us. Question.
How long did you live in Florida?
I'm sorry,
How long did you live in Florida?
about a year.
So you just stayed in one place in Florida?
No, we went
traveled a little bit.
we went back
just
up north.
along the East Coast.
Yeah.
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 Mhm.
We traveled for time in Florida for checking.
Yay!
10 years.
That's fantastic.
I'd do it again in a
Oh, I
heartbeat.
know.
Did you do the whole United States?
Yeah.
That was on our
Ah, that's cool.
bucket.
On our bucket list.
Mhm.
How big was yours?
Well, we started out with a 32 foot, then went to a 33 foot, then went to a 37 foot.
Wow.
We thought we'd do it for 6 months to a year, and then, but then it was too small because we kept going and we moved. And we're having such a good time, we didn't want to stop, so that's why we traded up the first time.
Mm.
Anyhow, yeah.
Oh,
That's great.
totally, yeah.
That's great.
See what you pull out of people.
I know, it's
Yeah.
great, I love it.
Yeah.
It was an adventure.
It was.
I mean, so on one hand, yeah, we were in limbo, and on the other hand, we got to begin the next phase.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So when you travel around doing readings and introduce the book, how much of it do you relive, or are you somewhat beyond the relive? You get the emotional things, but do you get the smack in the face every time?
It's still a smack, but it doesn't knock me down. Yeah, it's been a while since I, saw a stuffed lamb and cried. We had little lammies in the, for the room we're gonna have. If I saw one in the store, I would just tears. And so I still feel it, but it's not the level, I guess, the intensity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would say for me, and I think sometimes it depends on the audience or who we're with, you pick up the energy of other people, but so I do feel like sometimes I relive it deeply, but it's still, there's now years between it, and I think in some ways this, even reading it and sharing it, has helped. Yeah.
Because it's very much like death.
Mhm.
Oh, accidentally, I've said the baby died when the baby died. I've just said that accidentally so many times instead of when we lost the baby. It's like, because it's just what it felt like.
Yes. And you don't really know, and I think that was part of it too. When it happened, we don't have any specific rituals or ceremonies for this kind of an ending. And I know that there were a lot of people in our world, a lot of friends and family, who just sort of didn't want to talk about it anymore, or didn't know how to deal with it themselves either. And so, I think that part of this as well was kind of a ritualistic process for us of dealing with what felt like a death. Yes. And it was a death of a dream.
Yeah. And people say things, that they're trying to be helpful. But boy, do we say stupid things to each other. Say stupid things,
Stupid things people say,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Is it hard to go back to the area? Or you do worry about family?
I find it still very hard. Yeah, I do. And we don't tend to go to a lot of public places in that area, like stores. We avoid things like that. So, and we'll visit with friends or whatever, but we'll do it at their spaces or but
I would never want to do social work in that area again,
no.
in that county. I just wouldn't do it because conflict of interest. It's just, yeah. I just, Murphy's Law. Vermont is very small, very small.
Yes. Did you get to go to Vermont in your travels?
Yeah, we
yeah,
did.
yeah.
We have some friends who own a house there, and now we have a nephew who lives up there.
Nice.
They were just up there in August. But we don't have more. We don't have more anymore. It was a hardship.
Yeah.
We learned a lot of, well, there's a lot of barriers to adoption in general. I mean, if you're gonna do international adoption, the money is insane. The amount of money you better walk in with, and most agencies are very expensive. Foster care, their whole goal is reunification. So there's, that's risky. But then as an LGBTQ couple, there's even more barriers. And I think something we've learned is a lot of people think that because gay marriage is legal now, that there are no more barriers. Really? Live in my skin for a while. Because it's, there's still so many barriers to things everywhere. I think we all in the room know that. And there's only a few countries that you can go to if you did want to do international as a queer couple that would allow you. And in some states, there's a lot of restrictions around how you do it. Like one person might have to, even in foster care, one person might have to be the adoptive parent and the other one later. And It's just,
We were one of the very last states to legalize same-sex adoption. Our laws here were only lifted pretty darn
Pretty
recently.
recently, yes.
And I lost my niece and nephew that I had helped to raise for a few years to their alcoholic father in Texas, because there's no way I would have been able to take legal custody here,
Mm-mm.
clearly being in a domestic partnership with another woman, so I
Mhm.
lost him for a few years because of that.
mm,
So it was there are many stories worse than that where people were fostering
mhm,
children and got found
And got
out.
found
and had to
out.
Give them back, basically.
Mhm.
It was crazy.
It is,
Mhm.
it's very much still. Mhm.
Especially, I mean, there are still kids out there in a lot of places that need homes, but
Yes.
they make the hurdles so high, especially for us.
Mhm.
mhm, mhm,
Definitely.
mhm. And that whole, like, I grew up thinking I was different, inadequate, whatever, being suicidal a couple times in my life because I did not fit in, even when I didn't know why. I just was so, and then it's like still like,
Yeah.
please just see me as a human being and worthy of loving and being loved, like, why is that so hard?
That's
Yeah.
the next book.
Hmm.
We will take some of the money from those 2 or 3 books that have come out of this discussion. You're right. We'll take a partnership.
Mm,
Can't think of a better place to partner with.
yes.
I'll second.
Mhm.
No lethal service.
I think she thought of it first at the end.
I'll second it.
It's been on her mind for a while.
What would you want people to come away from reading the book?
Mm,
A sense of being seen and belonging is important to me. Just that people know they're not alone. It's such a lonely thing to just grow up queer and feel like you have to hide, but then to go through these hurdles and run against these closed doors and not know there's someone else who's experiencing it. And not only the queer community, but anyone who's lost, gone through infertility treatment and all of this adoption, trying to grow your family in any way, shape, or form, and just having these doors slammed on you, and that they feel like they belonged and had a family.
yeah. And that you can survive.
Mm,
It sure helps when you have love.
Yeah.
Mhm.
mhm. Willing to go through the hard stuff and talk about it. I think, I know so many families who don't talk, and I don't know where we'd be if we didn't talk about it every day for a year.
And many years after.
And many years, be able to,
How many times did we have to read different parts of it? Many years after, so.
Yeah.
Right.
yeah.
Mhm.
And you mentioned the process. I think hearing other people's stories is very healing. Hearing
Yes.
what you went through or what anyone has gone through in their family, just keeping their family intact or growing their family, or just in these hurdles that we face, and to know that we can all hold hands and face it together, as a group, not all alone, or even as a couple all alone. It's really
Mhm.
important for me to know, for people to know.
Mhm. Anything else?
Not at the moment. Give me a minute.
I know.
Any other questions? Any comments?
Just a brief comment, it's lovely that your book appeals not only to, in a specific way, the queer community, but it has a universal application, as you said, about
Yeah, thank
grief
you.
and so on. So I think that's quite important.
Thank you. Thank you.
And to piggyback on that, it also isn't just about women.
Mhm.
I mean, there's certain things obviously that we went through that were
Yes,
women
right.
centric. But the idea of creating a family, the adoption, all of that is
Mhm.
definitely more universal.
Mhm.
And I know that when we adopted, we did it so that I was the adopter. I mean, we were adopting from Texas,
Yeah.
where it wasn't an option.
Mhm.
And our social worker in New York had to pretend that my spouse that we didn't live together. And at that time, when my first son was born, we had already been together for 7 years.
Mhm.
And we had to pretend that, and then we had to keep it that way so we could get certain services, even in New York. So we never did a joint adoption. We talked about it, but the costs for him to be added on as a parent, we could send the kids to camp, or we could send the kids, one of our kids had mental illness, to go to private school. It was a choice, the lawyer or the school. So, I mean,
Yeah.
everything that you're talking about also has a life beyond, which is central to those feelings that come through in the book, which is so important. But there's so many obstacles,
Yes.
that we couldn't do. Our income would be $3 over the limit
Right.
if you did this.
Yes.
It would
Yeah.
say this if it's that. I mean, and you weigh all of those things constantly.
Constantly. Yeah.
And so who's the parent? Who's not the parent? When are you the parent?
Mhm.
And you may not think of those things, but people looking in put that judgment on you.
Mhm.
Yes.
Mhm.
And that adds a tremendous extra burden that you don't necessarily want or need.
No.
Yeah. It reminds me of doing the FAFSA for our oldest going to college.
Right.
And so there's a federal form and a
Exactly.
state form. So they basically said you have to lie on the state form because we're a family of 4 in Vermont and a family of 3 to the federal government. And so and it just feels so degrading, and demeaning.
Mhm.
Let's do the same thing.
Yeah.
Exactly the same.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
How many people live in your household?
Mhm.
What's the
What's the income? Mhm.
I know, who are you? What is my answer? Yeah, it's
Yes.
This mental.
Yeah. Denial at the level of existence.
Mhm,
Yes.
mhm.
Mhm.
For me, your conversation this morning hit a lot of touchstones of my past. And when we're talking about not fitting in, I have a flashback to grade school where I wasn't a good ball player.
Mhm.
And when it came to choosing
Mhm.
for a baseball team, I was last.
Yeah.
And no, I felt that not fitting in. And it came back to me that moment several times during the conversation. I have 2 natural children, 2 adopted children,
Mhm.
and I can understand the grief and the sorrow when you don't have that relationship
Mhm.
going on because I'm homosexual.
Mhm. Mhm. Thank you.
So it gets out there. Your book.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Then I will say thank you very much. And
Thank
we have
you.
food here. We have something to eat. And there are books available. There's some sign-in sheets. And you can either remain seated or you can get up and get food.
And we are contributing for if you buy a book, we're contributing to that.
Oh, awesome.
I can't remember how much. She's in charge of finance.